Hello. I haven't really spoken about my Japanese study for quite a while, have I? And I think you can probably guess. You can probably guess why that is. It's not been going especially well. It wasn't going especially well last time I talked to you. But that's not to say it's going badly. I mean, yes, I could be doing more. I mean, I really could be doing a lot more. um, because I find myself not really studying these days. I'm using Japanese, yes. You know, my wife's talking to me in Japanese. I am mostly still replying in English. I occasionally watch television in Japanese. I haven't been reading in Japanese, which is probably the thing that I want to correct the most. Well, that or actually, a bit more speaking practice, which I'm not really getting much of at all. But I will say that despite this complete lack of effort on my behalf, and, that's just the way life goes sometimes. Sometimes you find yourself busy with other things. It's still improving. I know my Japanese is improving. I can feel it's improving. It's weird. Like, my wife is talking to me in Japanese a lot. So I don't really see myself getting better when I'm speaking with her. I can't really see it. But it's when I speak to other people that I don't know that I see the improvements. Well, I don't really speak to them. It's more if they speak to me. Well, I speak to them a bit. It might be like I don't know, in a supermarket or something, and someone says something to me, and I realize I can respond fine, and I've understood everything they say, or I don't know, it's something a bit more complicated, like going to a doctor's. Now, obviously, I'm usually accompanied by my wife when we go to the doctors, because it's just, everything they say is just difficult. It's like a different language. But years ago, when I'd go, it would really just be, okay, I've understood almost nothing of what you've said. But now I feel like I can understand all of the bits that I can understand, if that makes sense. So all of the bits of the conversation that are sort of normal bits of the conversation that aren't the specialist words that I don't understand. And, for certain topics that aren't, too specialist, then I can usually follow along fine. And that's, every now and again, it's sort of, I'm sitting there and I sort of think, I think my Japanese is getting better. And that's, that's a great feeling when that happens. But I will say there is one thing that I am still, to this day, I still struggle with, and I feel like I've made zero improvement with it. And it's something that I do not think I would struggle in other languages. I don't know, maybe there are other languages that work in a similar fashion to Japanese. But there is something that as an English speaker, as a native English speaker, I find incredibly confusing about Japanese. And it makes learning the language so much harder. And that is that in Japanese, it seems to be okay. I'm not saying everyone does this, but I've noticed a lot of people do. And according to what my wife tells me, it's normal. It seems okay to just forget about the subject of a sentence and just start talking. And then the listener has to become a detective and try and work out what it is that you're talking about. And I have lost count of the amount of times that this has happened. I've lost count of the amount of times when someone said something to me. It's probably only a short sentence. In fact, the short sentences are the worst. If it's a longer sentence, I've got more of a chance of getting the context and understanding what it is we're actually speaking about. But the short sentences, they are the worst. And so many times I've understood everything in the sentence, all of the vocabulary, all of the grammar. I understand the sentence. And yet I have no idea what's being said. Which is so weird, isn't it? How can that even be possible? How can you understand the sentence, but not understand what's being said? I mean, I understand what is said, but I don't understand what I don't understand what it's being said about. it sort of feels like you're arriving late to a conversation, or mid-conversation, and you're just trying to, like pick up the conversation, and you want to interrupt and say, sorry, what are we talking about here? I probably should have noted down a few examples where this happens so you'd be able to understand better what I was talking about. But essentially, it can be something as simple as, I don't know, just sitting at the table one morning, and my wife could say something like, "Mother likes music, doesn't she?" Now, the problem I have with this sentence is we've not established whose mother it is we're talking about. So, I have to ask, well, whose mother are we talking about here? It could be the case that there is some unwritten rule in Japanese that I have not yet to learn, that has not been mentioned in any books I've read or anything like that my wife's not bothered to tell me about. That means, like, if I just use the word mother and don't specifically try to say your mother, then I'm definitely talking about my mother. But as far as I know, that doesn't exist. Although there are different words for, like, my mother and someone else's mother, but then they don't always have to be used in informal situations, if you're talking with a friend or a partner or something. So there's no really good way of determining it. I mean, that's just a simple example and not perhaps the best one. I'm trying to remember what happened the other day. It was a really good example where I don't know what was it now. I was just in the kitchen and my wife came in to me and said something, and I just gave her this blank stare, and I was just thinking, what on earth? I understand everything you've just said, but what on earth are we talking about here? And I just ended up saying to her, like, look, you've forgotten the subject of this sentence. And then she, tells me what it is, and suddenly everything just magically makes sense. And she apologizes for it, and I just say, no, don't worry about it. It just seems to be the way that Japanese works. At least I think it is. It could, a large part of this could be due to my wife, for all I know. There are people, I speak to. In fact, I'm thinking of my mother in particular, who will just start speaking to you, and you just have to ask, like, what are we talking about? And that seems to be a constant thing that happens with my mother. Interestingly, with my when I'm speaking to my wife, and sometimes I've understood exactly, everything she just said. I've understood a sentence, but I just lack the context to make any sense of it. And she can see that I've not understood her, or I'll say that I've not understood. She'll then try to explain it in English. And when she does that, she puts a subject in there. And it's like, well, yeah, I can understand what you've said now, but if you had said exactly the same thing you've just said in English, but in Japanese, with the subject included, I would have understood that as well. It's almost like when she switches into sort of like English mode, she becomes more descriptive. And I am wondering if this is, just one of the major differences between English and Japanese. And if it is, then I really wish I was a native Japanese speaker learning English, not a native English speaker learning Japanese. Because I have to say, I think Japanese people have a much easier time learning English than English people learning Japanese. I mean, even if I'm wrong about the lack of a requirement for a subject in a sentence, sometimes you've still got all of those thousands of characters to learn. So I don't know. I am wondering if English is an easier language. I sort of feel it must be. I do remember some friends that I had from Romania and Bulgaria who were telling me that English is an easy language to learn. And I think one thing they said was that it is very descriptive. So maybe I'm beginning to understand what they meant by that. I didn't have any clue what they might be talking. I should have pressed them further on it. I should have said, what do you mean? Because it's just fascinating to me. I find all of these kind of things fascinating, like the ways in which different languages learn. I think I find it fascinating enough. I could probably have done it for a job. Maybe if I wasn't, if I didn't go down the route of computing, maybe I would have gone down the route of languages instead. I mean, there are some similarities, to be perfectly honest, to computer languages and spoken languages, even if they're vastly different things. There's still sort of some similarities in there. You've still got like a syntax There's still sort of like a grammar in both of these areas, along with various sort of like verbs and vocabulary and so on. Actually, I've just thought of another example, although this one's easy to understand, but I suppose the first time I came across it, it was a bit weird for me. And that's, you can just say hungry, just one word, and that's apparently a completely valid sentence in Japanese. You'd never be able to do that in English. You can't just go around and just, I mean, I don't know, maybe people would understand. If you were to walk into a restaurant and just say hungry, then yes, people would, I'm sure, gather what you were talking about. You'd also sound a bit like a, sort of like prehistoric man, a bit like a caveman, if you were to do that. I mean, my image of the way that cavemen speak, and this is just from like films and other things that are completely untrue, is that a caveman would say, me hungry. Well, caveman, sort of like a Tarzan character might speak like that. You see, that kind of speech pattern in various films. But, even Tarzan has managed to tell us that he is hungry. Whereas in Japanese, he's just hungry. And there are many examples of this where you can just have a verb just on its own, or an adjective just on its own, and it just seems to be a complete sentence. And in those, in those very, very simplified examples, I'm completely fine with that. You sort of get used to it in the same way that there are no plurals in Japanese. So you could say, on the way to school, I saw cat. And you don't necessarily know if someone's saying they saw one cat or they saw many cats. Because there's no real way of saying I saw a cat or I saw cats, because there aren't any plurals. You can specifically say I saw one cat or I saw 3 cats. But there are these like little bits, little helpful bits that are sort of missing in Japanese. Which does seem to require a lot more sort of like a detective sort of action going on to try and understand things completely. And when you're doing that sort of detective work, along with trying to just process a new language, it just makes things extra confusing. It really does. So I suppose if there's any Japanese people listening and you want to know a trick, like a secret to making yourself understood to people who are learning Japanese, I would say be as verbose as possible, be as descriptive as possible. Talking slowly is good. Talking slowly always helps, but sometimes saying less doesn't help as much as if you were to say more. I think the same advice could perhaps be given to anyone from any language speaking to someone who's not a native speaker of their own language. I think it's a bit of a natural reaction, isn't it, to sort of speak slowly and then try to use less words, I think. I think that's a natural reaction for most of us, shorter sentences and so on. But I don't know if someone's struggling to get to grips with the context, then it's not going to help so much. Anyway, just something to bear in mind, and something I thought was quite interesting. I don't know if you're having the same troubles when learning English. I hope you're not, just because I feel that English is quite a descriptive language. We can't just launch straight into a sentence and, talking about it when we haven't actually bothered to define what it is. But on the other hand, I recognize there must be an awful lot of things about English which make it a hard language to learn. And you know what? I think I'm almost certain that had I been studying a European language, had I picked, French, German, Spanish, or some other language, I would probably be fluent by now. I think I mentioned this before on the podcast years ago, but the US government has this ranking of languages by languages by their level of difficulty to learn for native English speakers. And I think German was one of the easier languages for a native English speaker to learn. French maybe a little bit harder. And then level 5, it went up to 5 levels. Level 5, right at the top, was Japanese. And I think Chinese might have been in there as well. But then there was a special asterisk next to Japanese that was saying that no, Japanese is even harder because of cultural things. Actually, it was saying about formalities in the languages and different levels of formality. It should have added an extra note to also say and also people just don't always mention the subject so clearly, and there are also plurals in the language and some various other things that make it a bit confusing at times. But yeah, I suppose confusing is also interesting and challenging. So it's certainly not a boring language to learn, and it's still a language I love. It's weird, after all these years of having so much exposure to it, sometimes I'll just do something simple, like switch on the radio in the car. Obviously, it's a Japanese radio station. That's the only ones we can pick up over here. And there'll be someone speaking on the radio, and I'll think, wow, doesn't Japanese sound beautiful as a language? Maybe it is. Maybe it's part of that, the language being so different that makes it so attractive to me. I'm not sure. Anyway, I do hope you've had, or maybe will have in the future, that same experience where you've been listening to someone speaking English and thinking, wow, it's a beautiful sounding language, so you can understand what it is I'm talking about. And to be fair, it does actually happen with English as well for me. It depends on the speaker. Sometimes I'll be listening to an English radio station or podcast or whatever, and someone will be speaking, and I'll think, wow, that's doesn't English sound really good? That's a bit of a weird thing to say, but if someone's got a particularly good accent, they're really articulate, they're very clearly spoken, then yeah, English can sound really impressive to me. Even my own language can sound really impressive to me, which is a good thing. I think you should, if possible, be able to like the language that you're learning and liking your own language as well. I think that's just great. Well, I suppose it's more than liking it, it's loving it, isn't it? I think if we love our own languages, we'll sort of be better custodians of them. We'll take greater care of them. And that might indeed be a subject for a future podcast. But until next time, I look forward to speaking to you again soon, and bye-bye.